Everything looks good. So today's topic, we're going to really continue on some of our thoughts here about really optimizing how we use ground reaction forces and how we use the ground. Tyler and I wanted to go over some detail on a new product that we have coming out at SuperSpeed Golf. It's actually available right now for pre-orders with a nice little special on there. So check that out if you find what we have to say today interesting. But again, I think, Tyler, we talk about training people to use the ground better all the time. And I feel like there are some really good things out there to work with. And then, but there's definitely a lack of being able to work with all the different aspects of ground reaction force. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think the key is what you said there at the end. Is like a lot of great stuff, but there's so many aspects of the ground reaction force that being able to pinpoint and train and target them all with one product and drill progressions was where we saw a really great opportunity here.
Yeah, so well, let's without further ado, let's take a look at it. So this is what we're going to be talking about a little bit today, and some of the drills and reasons that we built this way. But this is our new SuperSpeed Force Board Pro. And when you get a Force Board Pro, you're going to get this platform. And just so you know, this doesn't really do it justice. It's pretty big, right? And heavy. I mean, this thing's about, I think, it's like 32 inches wide by, like 22 inches the other way. So definitely big enough to be able to stand on no matter what you're doing. We've even had some baseball players on it at this point, which haven't had any issues with the width, which was something that we found with a lot of the different types of like board setups. We're all too narrow. I really wanted something wider. The next thing that we wanted to do is we really wanted to be able to not only use this, to be able to tilt back and forth, but we also wanted to be able to put different attachments under the feet to be able to look at point of application, all kinds of different things there. So we came up with really four different types of attachments. We can start with the really easy ones here at the bottom. So, I mean, as a golf coach, I love having like markers to be able to, kind of put in angles for foot flare or ball position or different things like that. So these little yellow pegs just fit in any of these holes, and they're just going to mark a position. These ovals are pretty big. So these are pretty large, pretty tall devices. We use this a lot on the bottom of the board when we're trying to do things with balance and stability. And we'll show you some of those drills here in a minute. The green ones are little rounds. Those can be used on the bottom or the top of the board. Those are kind of a macro sense of where a foot position might be. And then we can use it on the bottom for more subtle things. The one that I really think is the coolest is this little tri-circle, is what we call it. But what it is it's actually three little circles, and they're pretty small. They're very low to the ground. So it's just a little bit of feedback. But when you use those, it gives you a really specific point of where you are in your foot when you're pushing. So that's kind of the overview of what we got with the Force Board Pro. Tyler, what else have you seen, and what are some of the aspects of this that you've seen that have worked with your players?
Yeah, again, I love the flexibility of being able to utilize it for just some balanced physical training. If we have players that maybe just lack the physical capacity, we'll show you a few of those today. So the versatility there is awesome. I like using it with golfers who have really, honestly, Mike, no concept of how to utilize the ground or where to push, because you can very quickly attack a lot of aspects of the force very quickly, right? Like I just had a player where I had the grays underneath so we could get some shifts here. I had a green under the trail and a red under the lead, and could all of a sudden get a lot of good things happening in their force traces in just a few swings.
Yeah, and the other thing to note here too, just on the product, is the board is kind of semi-rigid, and we did that on purpose so that we can actually get a heel up and a toe up, or we can actually shift positions a lot, and it won't be too exaggerated that you can't still hit golf balls off of it. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. We'll show you a number of them here today. So let's get into this. First of all, just a little reminder, our main idea when we talk about swing mechanics, ground reaction forces are kind of at the base of the speed pyramid that we look at for, what's important when it comes to mechanical aspects of the golf swing. So one of the reasons we talk about ground reaction forces so much is that without that good foundation, it's really hard to create efficient sequencing and really good lag and wrist mechanics. So it's a very key item to what we're doing. Now, one of the things we haven't talked as much about in the past, Tyler, and I think this is a topic that you really love too, and we're going to kind of go off subject here from the force board for a little bit, talk a little bit about some of the stuff coming in our app as well. But that's kind of some of the physical connections that we have to ground reaction forces. Because yes, are there technical aspects to creating, more power from the ground? Absolutely. But I think there's also there's many, I would say, characteristics physically that can lend a person to have success using the ground, and some that will inhibit their ability to use the ground. Here at SuperSpeed, we try to keep this stuff simple for everybody. That's main goal that I have. We kind of break this into three main categories. Our first is what we call joint stability. Now, Tyler, when you talk about joint stability, we're really talking about some of the muscles around the joint and how that joint functions, not really from a range of motion standpoint. Can you talk a little more about stability?
Yeah, again, when I think of stability, Mike, especially as we start thinking about ground reaction forces and the connection of our feet to the ground, it's the capacity of our body to kind of create what I would call like stable bases, activate muscles to create again, the stability, the forces that we need to be able to transmit force through the rest of our body, right? This is that idea of like, I tell my students this all the time, Mike, where like if I hook a rubber band to a door and the door's not closed and I start pulling on the rubber band, that door is just going to swing wildly and make it really hard for me to move. Whereas if I can kind of lock that door into place and create what I would call dynamic stability, meaning, yes, we have some movement. We don't want the feet to just be fully connected to the ground, but they need to be connected enough that we can transmit those forces and we don't have joints that are kind of falling out of their range of motions and things such as that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, to keep it really simple, I think of joint stability as like the muscles being activated and strong enough around that joint to make it function properly. The second thing that we would look at then is mobility. And when we're talking about the ground, we find that ankle mobility can be really, really key in a number of different ways. And we'll talk about all those different ways. But basically, mobility here is that ankle's ability to move side to side or in eversion, inversion, and move front and back in, dorsal and plantarflexion during the swing. If we don't have those ranges of motion, I think there can be a whole lot of things that happen there that can cause some big issues.
Yeah.
The last one, and maybe the trickiest one of all, is something we call proprioception, or PNF. And this one's kind of more of like the brain's connection to those joints in our lower body. This is like your body's ability to feel pressure going back and forth. And when we talk about ground reaction forces and having to look at point of application and all of this, like proprioception is so important because sometimes people feel like they're pushing through the ball of their lead foot, but they don't even really feel accurately where the ball of their lead foot is because of lack of proprioception. So another major physical connection here, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I just had a person on the plates yesterday. They're like, oh, I feel like there's so much more force going through my right leg. And I look at their data and it's like, no, you have like twice as much force going through your left leg. So I think that's the thing that people really struggle with, that is a key component of being able to produce ground reaction force the correct way.
Right. So look, these things are very important to optimizing ground reaction forces. So here at SuperSpeed, we want to help you with that. So the first thing we want to be able to do is identify which of these issues maybe apply directly to you and in your golf game. So in our app, which I know we're going to get questions about when it's out, it's in beta right now. So if anybody that's here wants access to the beta, please just shoot us an email at info@superspeedgolf.com. We'd be happy to send you an invite both to Android or iOS beta, but we're getting really close, friends. We're pushing here for like a mid-October launch of the first stable platform, but it's going to be really cool. One of the first things that we have in there that you will do when you open the app is you're going to go through a self-physical assessment. A few of those screens are going to be directly related to what we're talking about today. So the first one is we're going to be doing a front squat. So front squat's going to really kind of test a lot of your lower body mobility, so hip hinge, knee flexibility. It's also, though, going to be testing the dorsiflexion in our ankles. And in our app, we'll be asking you, like, can you get your pelvis below your knees? And then also, do your feet want to flare when it happens? And this can give us a lot of insight into whether your ankles are working properly. We tried to hit a lot of things at once, simple tests that can tell us a lot. The second one that we're going to be doing is a test we call ankle rocking. And this is just really a simple ankle eversion inversion test to see if you have the mobility and the motor control to be able to do that. Because we do this every single time we make a golf swing, and especially your trail foot eversion is an incredibly important factor in your ability to start this whole chain off with ground reaction forces and create really solid lateral force in that trail side. The last screen that we're going to do that's really affects ground reaction force is going to be a single leg balance test. And this is really just a test where we're going to be looking at, can you balance, on one leg? And then we're also going to do that with our eyes closed, which is a very simple way to also start to test our proprioceptive nervous system. If anybody wants to try this right now, it's kind of fun, but go ahead and stand up and get your thigh about parallel to the ground. Once you feel yourself balanced, go ahead and close your eyes. And what you'll notice when you do that is for almost 100% of people we've tested, it gets a whole lot harder at that point. So that's a big factor in testing proprioception. Now, Tyler, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, no, I think what's awesome about these physical screens, Mike, is that they are going to unlock and assess a golfer's capacity to do some of the things that maybe you want him to do as a coach or as a trainer, because I think it can be very frustrating for the player and the coach. Let's say Mike brought up the idea of the importance of that outside of the foot or that eversion of the foot in the backswing. If a golfer lacks the mobility at the ankle to do that in a swing, well, then where we need to start is increasing some of those mobility properties of that ankle, or matching it with maybe some different things in the swing, as opposed to just everyone beating their heads against the wall and nothing can happen. So I'm excited for these physical screens to help target where it is that we need to attack, specifically the feet in these situations to unlock the capacity to produce force.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been working with physical assessments for many, many years. We work closely with our friends at TPI, and then whenever we have a player that we assess, we're going through a full physical assessment to look at how their body works before we're trying to make recommendations about their swing. Well, we're taking that whole model and doing the same thing to help you get a comprehensive speed and power program in our app. And this is the start of it, is doing some of these screens. And there's many more here as well that'll be available in the app. Well, now let's look at what kind of is our tried and true, and that's protocols, right? So we've identified what areas may be an issue. Now we can start to look at how do we fix it, right? And we've developed a number of different drills for balance and stability. And we built these with our good friend Jason Glass. So you're going to see Jason Glass in all the videos that we do for the fitness, if you will, or the balance and stability section of force board drills. But you can see in this photo, this player actually has the two gray ovals right down the center of the board underneath. And even on turf, that's lifting it up enough that makes a very unstable surface. And, we can do that in a number of different ways, easier, harder. We can do 360 ones. We have so much flexibility of what we can do with this. But the balance and stability drills are going to kind of start with that unstable surface underneath the foot. Again, think of any good drill is going to make whatever you're trying to do harder. If it's easy for you to do these kind of movements standing on the ground, we're going to make it harder by making the surface underneath you unstable. And then when you get back on the ground, it's going to seem really, really easy. So let's look at these levels. We have 4 levels of balance and stability drills that we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at stuff with single leg stability, 2-leg balance, advanced single leg stance stuff, and that's going to be where we start to get into a lot more movements and actually doing what you were doing with like that Superman move. We'll actually be lifting some small weights and moving them around to make everything more difficult. And then our level 4 is where we're going to really start to target some of the eyes closed drills, where we're going to be able to really look at proprioception in a major way. When we ran our golf academy, Tyler, every single player that came through had a 12-step balance and stability program. And I mean, I don't have detailed study data like you would do, but I can tell you that clinically, just watching it over the years, I think balance and stability in the golf swing equates so closely to consistency in the golf swing more than anything else. Being able to repeat the same movement, just that overall consistency element is so much improved by improving these things.
Yeah, and honestly, when we got to go up and visit Jason at his facility in Canada, who's again one of the best at this type of training, I was amazed at how simple some of his training might have looked from the outside, but then you start doing it and you realize the difficulty of it, and really starting with these stability drills and these things that we know are going to then carry over to a golfer's ability to produce force. So it was awesome to team up with Jason on this stuff as well.
So these drills will be available very soon. We're really excited about these, and like I said, Jason will be featured in all of these drills. They're going to be in the app very shortly. They're also going to be available on our website here very soon. So check some of this out. I think it's on the Force Board landing page, at least a couple of them at this point. But 4 different balance and stability protocols, and there's probably 5 or 6 drills in each of those protocols. All right, Tyler, we need to go through the basics here. We can't do this without reminding people what we're looking at when we're starting to talk about ground reaction forces. As you know, a good scientist, I know you can't handle that. So let's go through that real quick. We'll kind of tag team this and just kind of talk about some of these details so that we can then really look at some of the drills that we're doing to look at these things with the force board.
For sure. And I think what this does, Mike, is this sets the stage for the kind of the genesis of this force board, which is that there are different things we look at in ground reaction force, right? The one that we maybe talk a lot about is just the magnitude of the force. So how big is the force that the player is producing? And that's a big piece of the puzzle, right? And there are ways that we can train that with physical capacity and different things like that. We also want to look at things like the direction of that force, understanding that golfers just don't push up and down, but they push towards and away from the target. They push towards and away from the ball and create these cool force couples that can create those rotational torques that we need. And then obviously, we kind of already mentioned it with some of those early slides, but the point of application or where they're actually pushing on the foot. And I think over the years that I've been able to work with golfers at training the ground reaction force, it's awesome how intertwined these are, but how important it is that they kind of line all of these up together, right? It's not enough just to have a great magnitude or a great point of application. The very best players in the world, the most efficient, the most powerful golfers are the one that line these all up together and can create force in the right directions at the right timings and at the right magnitudes.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to interject too. Again, as a golf coach who likes to develop training programs and training products that are going to help a lot of people, I can tell you flat out, what drove me crazy is like there's so many products out there that claim to be like ground reaction force training aids. And really all they are is like a board that has a little thing down the middle that rocks back and forth. And I mean, yes, is there an element of working on ground force that can help with? Yes, I think one of the things it can help with is it can help a little bit with the timing, timing of kind of when you start to push with the lead side. Do you agree with that, Tyler?
Yeah, for sure. I think you're 100% right. And again, timing is an important piece of the puzzle, right? But it's still just one piece of the puzzle. And again, I think that's where as you start to understand the ground reaction force itself and how connected a lateral force is to a vertical force, to a rotational force, that's where you start to understand you've got to be attacking all these aspects of the ground reaction force.
Absolutely. And then another product that's out there that we actually had a question about, which actually we love, which is the force pedals. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still going to use force pedals with some of my players for certain things. I think they're a great training aid. And, they do a lot of cool things that you can do very quickly, and they're on the ground and that kind of thing. I think they're probably one of the best things out there that I've seen to work on point of application. Mm-hmm. However, I want to do more. I might want to work on point of application while working on shift timing. And I might want to work on point of application while working on rotational torque and setting the feet in different positions. So again, I think our Force Board Pro is not meant to replace a lot of these things. It's kind of meant to be more of a one-stop shop for balance and stability work, and then also a lot of different cool things that you can do working on a multitude of different types of ground reaction force training. Moving on, the kinetic sequence is something that we talk about a lot, and this kind of gets into more of that timing of when do these forces peak, when do they start, and in a very simple level, lateral force tends to be kind of the lowest, that trail side lateral force and peak first. Then we look at rotational torque or horizontal plane torque. And then we're going to look at vertical force being the biggest, and that's more on the lead side. So if we look at the kinetic sequence, we're looking more like trail side early, where's that peaking, then the feet working together, and then kind of the lead side more working as we get there. So that general shift of how we're going from the trail side to the lead side, making this all work effectively, is incredibly important. And, again, I think I'd reiterate that working on those different things to make all these things work, it's a lot more complicated, and there's a lot more things to work on than just working on shift timing or just working on point of application. And that's where you start to see these protocols that we'll start to build with the force board, be able to work on all these different elements.
Yeah, and I like, Mike, as you bring that up, I was thinking about this, the ability to train these simultaneously, right? We're all working with golfers who have limited time. You have maybe limited time in your lesson where you're trying to maximize your experience, helping them move better, create force better, create better golf swings. And so being able to work vertical force at the same time I'm working point of application, which is going to help me target horizontal plane torque. And all of a sudden I've got 3 or 4 of these done in a really nice drill progression instead of having to do 5 different drill progressions to attack all of these I think is where the secret sauce is in this.
Yeah. So if you guys have force plates or have gotten on force plates, some of the things that we like to see, lateral force, that's trail side lateral force, pushing toward the target. We like to see that to be about 20% of body weight. And we'll talk about impulse here in a second, Tyler, but I think we're starting to find that the impulse pattern of lateral force and the total impulse that we're getting out of lateral force is way more important maybe than even that peak value. But this is a lot of the new things that we're looking at with a lot of different players. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, again, the ability of that golfer to, in the backswing, to build up a lot of lateral force, right? Impulse is going to create larger quantities of motion, and is such a key piece of the puzzle.
Looking at torque, that's kind of our forces pushing in a force couple on the ground. We like this to kind of be peaking somewhere early in the downswing. And generally, we're liking that to be around 100. And it's a really kind of weird number or unit that we're looking at there. But on most of the systems, we're looking for about 100 units, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So moving on to vertical force. Vertical force, and I think another key here is that I want most of this coming off the lead leg. But we're looking for about 200% of body weight total, about 140% off the lead. That seems to be something that we're finding to be pretty attainable for a lot of high-powered players. But these are kind of just your general standards. I wanted to go through one other piece that I think is really important here that we keep kind of coming back to over and over again with a lot of our tour players that we get on the systems. And that's what the concept of moment arm. And this is complicated because it's kind of a 3D. You got to imagine all this in 3D. But, basically a moment arm, it's, how you gain torque in an easier way. So it's like having a wrench. And like if you had a lug nut on your tire and you're trying to turn it with your fingers, it's really hard. But if you get a big tire iron that's a few feet long, and then it's really easy to move the bolts. The same kind of thing. Where we find moment arm to be extremely important in the golf swing, it's kind of in that point where the club is kind of slowing down before it changes direction, right? It's kind of slowing down before the transition and then accelerating. The bigger the moment arm we can have during that point of the swing, essentially, the more acceleration we can get of the club with the least amount of force input. So that becomes really important. How did I do there, Tyler? I get all that?
Yeah. I think you did great. Again, I think of moment arm as it's just a simple distance from whatever is the axis we're trying to rotate around. I think this picture depicts it really well, where we have this overall force vector, the yellow force vector, and its distance from this red center of gravity of the body, and something we're kind of creating some rotation around as we're trying to initiate that downswing. And again, the basic idea is the further that yellow line is away from the red dot, meaning the longer that black line is, the more moment arm we have. And this gives us a mechanical advantage to produce more torque.
And there's 2 main components here. It's really important that we're getting, a strong amount of lateral force at this point, pushing toward the target, and that we're starting to get vertical force happening. Like those are kind of the 2 pieces that are really, really critical to this working. The other thing that's cool about moment arm is you really can't always tell from video if you've got a good one or not. So, this is Cody Blick. He's got a pretty strong moment arm from what we see. We can look at the same thing on Cheyenne Knight from the LPGA Tour. And I mean, her swing at that point looks picture perfect, right? But if I, throw her forces on top, we don't really have much of a moment arm at all. So those kind of things, this is one of those that you really got to measure because you got to see what it looks like. What's really cool is that now if you're using the system we use, the Smart to Move 3D plates, you can actually look at this, in real time on the system. So I think that's an absolute critical thing that I think it's a really cool feature that we've got on that now too. So very cool there. All right, so lead leg lateral force. This is one that Tyler always wants us to throw in. Would you say this is still probably one of our highest correlations to overall speed and power that we've seen?
It's right up there with vertical force. In some of my studies, it's a little higher, and some it's a little bit lower, but typically they're right up neck and neck. And what I always go back to, Mike, is the couple of long drive guys that I've looked at on the force plates. This number is it's almost unbelievable how big it is when these guys are producing 58, 60% of body weight for lead leg lateral. And again, this is that lead leg pushing really hard towards the target in the downswing, which creates a ground reaction force that kind of breaks them or stops them and just creates a really nice, powerful position. So they don't just kind of fall over themselves as they start shifting forward. And again, I think being able to work this as you're doing ground reaction force training is something that's really going to unlock some speed where I can utilize that force and that leg to almost create a little bit of a slingshotting or a whip type effect where I can really transfer everything out, stabilize that lower body, and then really get those arms and hands to just release it with high speeds through impact.
And one of the cool things we can do with the force board for this is we can actually do two different drills. We can set the force board up on an angle so that it's like you're swinging uphill so that you kind of feel that need to push into the lead side more. And then we can take it and do the opposite and actually push it that you're downhill so that you still got to create lead leg lateral, this is that force that would push the foot kind of back and away from the target as we go. You see with a lot of high level players that their foot comes off. Yep. So we can use that shift of the direction of the ground essentially to really train this in a really cool way.
Yep.
All right, here's our favorite. So looking at lateral, I mean, we look at impulses on all the different forces, but I'm starting to see that lateral force, trail leg lateral force impulse is one of the most important that we look at. And all impulse is really measuring that total cumulative amount of force over time that we're going to get during a certain portion of the swing.
Yep.
This is one of your favorites, right, Tyler?
Yeah, I love this because sometimes we feel this is a perfect example where this golfer maybe didn't get to the 20%, but I'll see plenty of golfers that just flash up to the 20% and then it disappears just as quickly as it appeared. And you get a very a sliver of a pie for an area under the curve instead of this big greened out area. And I think you brought this up, Mike, which I think is really important. The backswing, I think, is where we actually have a capacity to build this up over a little bit more time. So when I see golfers that can turn on the lateral force on that trail leg early, hang on to it, build it, keep it high for the entirety of the backswing, and those are players that just get in such good positions at the top of the swing. They create really nice moment arms to initiate the downswing. Like so many things fall into place if they can build this force over a longer period of time. So I'm always more lateral force for a longer period of time. I don't know if I've ever seen someone who does this too much in the golf swing.
Yeah, and again, there's so many aspects here to using the ground well. I think that's why, we now have a lot of different protocols for all of this. So some of the new ones in the app right now are ground force protocols. We have 3 new ground force protocols that you could use the force board with, you could use force pedals with. There's a lot of different ways to do these protocols. Our first one really works on kinetic sequence and point of application. So just kind of basics. The second one, we start to really look at direction and timing of force. You'll notice that there's a lot of stuff in here that works on trail leg lateral. Trail leg lateral force is such an important aspect. We think that one deserves a few different drills in here. And then we really start to work on kind of that direction on the lead foot, where that lead foot's pushing down, but also toward the ball. That's kind of the kind of big stuff in this one. And then we have one that's all about just generating magnitude of force. So we're looking at generating more vertical force, torque, and also looking at some of the lead leg laterals. So those are kind of our basic ground force protocols. Then we can start to look at the different drills that we can do kind of in a more advanced or more specific way using the force board. So we have 4 protocols that are going to be coming out with the force board. The first one is, again, kind of looking at pressure shift timing. So, again, this is kind of what I would look at as there being most of the stuff that's on the market right now from a, shift board type standpoint. These are the types of drills that we're putting together a whole program really to work on shift timing. And that's a big one because we need to be generating good lateral force with the trail side, and we need that to be transitioning to the lead side at the right time. And look, using a board that shifts from one side to the other gives you great feedback of knowing when that timing has to happen. So we're going to do one protocol all about pressure shift timing. The second one we're going to do is all about lateral force. So this is really going to be working primarily on trail leg lateral force, but it will also have a little bit in there about lead leg lateral force also, Tyler. And this is where we're going to be able to start putting, attachments under the feet. We're going to be able to use these different attachments in different ways to push in different directions. All kinds of cool stuff that we can do with that. Now, I think one of the hardest types of training to do, with ground force is rotational torque. Because again, now we're looking at one foot moving one direction, one moving the other. And one of the things that we do with the force board in this protocol that's really, really cool is we can lift a heel of one foot up and a toe of the other up so that we can actually exaggerate that feel of one foot having to push one direction and the other. And because that board can torque a little bit itself in the middle with an attachment under one edge or the other, it gives a very, very interesting and very positive sensation for developing, really good rotational torque. You saw some of these drills that we worked on. We did this with Padraig Harrington a few weeks ago. I thought he was pretty excited about a lot of that too.
Yeah, it was cool to see because I think that's something that is missing a little bit and can be tough to wrap your head around. And I think people have asked us questions about the rigidity of the board, and on purpose is what we define as semi-rigid, right? It's rigid enough that we can do all the nice shifting that we have in level 1, but it has enough of a play and give to it that we can start to do some of this rotational torque, which is a really powerful way to help golfers too.
And again, I also think that it's fine that, when you're standing on it with 2 feet, occasionally one of the sides might touch a little bit. That's all right. You still get the sensation of when it shifts. I think it's actually a little bit safer in that regard than it's smacking one side up or down a lot when it's on the ground. The last protocol that we have is going to be all about vertical force. And again, this is where we can throw those gray ovals under the front edge, and now all of a sudden you're on an uphill slope, or under the trail edge and you're on a downhill slope, or there's cool things that we can do, changing that angle of the ground essentially to make you have to work harder to exaggerate these forces. And we've seen some very positive results so far in the early days of doing a lot of those drills.
Well, and I think what's cool on that, Mike, is the ability to jump back and forth between what I would classify as assistive drills and resistive drills, where sometimes you have a player that needs that assistance, right? They need the board to be positioned in a way that's going to help them produce that force and feel that force because they've never felt it before. And then I know, Mike, you're obviously a big fan of this, of once they have that down, we've got to be able to make it harder. And that's where we then get into these resistive type motions where maybe they're bad with lead leg lateral. And so we actually want to put that board like they're on a downhill slope. So now, man, if they're not really good with lead lateral, it's going to be really tough for them to keep good stability. It's going to be tough for them to get a nice low point with the club when actually hitting a ball. And now we get the capacity to jump back and forth, and I think create a really nice training stimulus for the player.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. All right, well, I'm going to get this off real quick. And, if you guys have any questions, please pop them up. We're happy to hang around for as long as you'd like to answer them. I will also say, just a reminder, we are in pre-order right now for the Force Board Pro kit. That's going to be available for about the next couple weeks. We anticipate we're going to be shipping the first orders out in the order that we've received orders. I think we've gotten a number already. Those will be shipping out in mid-October. So we're really excited to see that. And like I said, please check out that page. If you have any other questions, hit us up. All right. Anything out there that we can answer about ground force, products out there to work on ground force, or anything else?
We did get, as many people are kind of typing in, Mike, we did get an email kind of earlier this week of someone who signed up where they actually asked us what we felt like were some of the most important forces to target in the swing. He was talking about especially at address, right at that initial point of the swing. And we had talked to him, and I think that goes perfectly with what we talked about with that lateral force impulse of the trail leg, right? It's that ability of being able to initiate a lot of really good trail leg lateral force, like the instant you're taking that club back, prior to you taking that club back, that's going to be a way that's going to allow you to leverage the lateral force production and get things started in a really good way into the swing. And so we kind of had answered that offline. I thought it'd be worthwhile to just touch base on that real quick here as these questions start rolling in.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple questions here about the app and how you can get it. So if you would like access to the beta of the app, we are in beta testing at this time. We anticipate that's going to last for about the next 2 to 3 weeks. Just send us an email at info@superspeedgolf.com and just request access to the app beta, and we will get you the details on whether you need the Android or iOS platform, and we'll get you signed up for that beta, and you can get into. We have a Facebook group going with all of the different beta testers. Yeah, more the merrier on that. We'd be happy to have you in that. And then, like I said, we were hoping to be launching that in mid-October. Oh, here's a good one. So what Force Board Pro drills do you recommend for a senior golfer? Well, I can tell you the first one that I'm going to have is like, and again, this is maybe stereotyped, but I would say one of the biggest things that we start to lose if we're not actively training it as you're aging are some of those, joint stability and proprioception functions in your body, right? And I think people tend to feel that as they get older. They tend to feel a little more unstable, not quite as balanced. I mean, I think working on that full series of balance and stability drills, we're able to make those drills much easier or much harder depending on which attachments you put on the bottom. You could put those red tricircles on the bottom and it would actually be a pretty easy mode unstable surface, but you still do those drills, and then you can work up to the green circles and eventually to those ovals. So you've got a lot of work that you could do there to really improve balance and stability. And I mean, that would be the absolute number one thing that I would start to work on. Once you get really good at that, I mean, doing all the different ground mechanics drills are only going to help you gain speed, power, and consistency. All right, got another question here. Any protocols improve or aimed at improving moment arm? Well, Tyler, I mean, I don't know, all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the two keys of moment arms are really good lateral force, right? Really good trail leg lateral force where they build it, have a lot of it as they're kind of finishing off the swing. And then players who can get force going to the lead side really early, and it's no shock that those two things would be tied into together, but being able to push really hard into the ground, create a nice vertical force from the lead leg. And so I think as Mike chuckles about that, obviously our lateral force progression, again, paired with some of the vertical, is going to attack both of those things and together really help a player start to create better moment arm positions at that point in the swing.
Absolutely. I think of moment arm more as a result, not a cause. If you think, I think that's what Tyler's saying there. Like, moment arm's what we look at big picture to say, hey, is ground reaction force working for this player? And if we see one that's not working, then we got to go back in and say, okay, what's the problem? Are they not laying down that lateral force enough? Are they not creating enough lead side vertical? What isn't working that's causing that moment arm to go way up through their body and, allow them to really lower their amount of torque? So yeah, I would say that almost all the drills work on moment arm. That's an interesting question here, Tyler. From Edward. So amputee below the knee left leg, will I benefit from using the Force Board Pro? I mean, I think you definitely would benefit from some of the balance and stability stuff. Obviously, there's going to be different brain to body connection there, depending on what kind of prosthetic you're using when you're playing golf. And, maybe a lot of that, some of that balance is coming more from the knee joint than it would be obviously from the ankle. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely see there being some benefit there. Tyler, you probably have more, could talk more here.
Like this won't shock you, Mike, that I'm like looking at Edward saying, Edward, we should connect. And if you're ever near Utah or I'm ever near you, let's throw you on some force plates. I've done a little bit of work in our lab with amputees, mainly as it relates to gait, even up and down stairs. And for sure, there's some compensations are made, of course, but as Mike brought out the type of prosthetic and different things like that, I still think there's a lot to be benefited from. I would love for us to connect sometime, Edward. And so send an email to info@SuperSpeed and we can get in contact and get you on some plates and then tailor some of that training to it. But I think, as Mike said, it for sure would help.
Another good question here from Jeffrey. Is this product meant to train the proper swing sequence, or is it a fitness trainer? Well, one of the things that we really like about this product and why we're releasing it is because we think it's kind of both. So it's a product that, yes, it can work on the physical aspects that are going to affect your golf swing. In this case, balance and stability and all we talked about today. But it's also, going to be able to work on a lot of those different pieces of the kinetic sequence. And, like our speed pyramid model, getting ground reaction forces working efficiently or kind of the bottom of that pyramid that allows you to get that speed rotating in your body and creating good sequencing through the rest of your swing and then out the club with your wrists and arms and club. So absolutely, I think it does both. And I think that's one of the reasons that, we like it, because we like stuff that can hit a lot of different areas at the same time.
And that's where I would say the assessments that are coming in our app, I think, will help you to understand maybe what your golfer specifically might need more of. You may have a golfer that just needs more of the physical training. They need to increase the capacity to utilize some of these forces, and that would kind of push you to some of those physical training pieces. You may have a golfer who passes all of those tests that Mike showed with flying colors, but they just cannot quite do it in the golf swing. And I think then you'd tend to kind of navigate or swing that pendulum more to what they would do from a golf specific side with the board. So,
all right, how much lead side lateral force would be ideal? More?
More is a good answer, man. Let me answer it this way. We put up kind of 20% as a number. I'm starting to look at the amount of lead side lateral a golfer has when the lead vertical peaks. So I see some golfers who might get to 25-30% of lead side lateral, but some of them that's occurring like post impact with the ball. And just like what we see with some of our other forces, I think when it's that late, it tends to be less effective at what we want it to do to the body and then subsequently to the golf club itself. And so I really like to see somewhere in the 20% at that lead side vertical, making sure that they're getting it in the downswing and not after. I will say that my really fast college players I look at, they tend to be closer to the low to mid 30s in that range. And I mentioned the long drive player that I looked at, who I think he was swinging like 145 miles per hour that day with club speed. His lead side lateral was up around the 58 to 60% of his body weight. And so I think if you're looking at it and you see values in the high single digits, low teens, for sure there needs to be more. And I think if you're looking for a way to unlock some speed, man, try and get that number climbing up.
I think the one that we see some players that almost get around 0 or even negative in some cases. Like that's we're talking about the elite of the elite getting up there, Tyler. Like there's a lot of people that having any is going to be a major advantage. All right, good question here. Does the golfer need to have an assessment on pressure plates before using something like the Force Board training protocols? Well, again, we try to keep it as simple as possible, and we realize that not every golfer out there, has access to 3D force plates and can get this, dialed in like that. Now, I would look at this in kind of a better and best kind of scenario, right? Like, yes, if you can go get a force analysis and then you can send us some of that data or the results, we can tell you very specifically what you should be doing in a protocol. And, we may pull 2 drills out of this protocol and 2 drills out of this protocol to put something together that could be a little bit more fine-tuned. The way we built these protocols, though, there's no negative. We build these drills so that even if you're good at lateral force, doing a couple drills for lateral force isn't going to hurt you. If you're really good at that, but you're really poor at torque, we should absolutely move more toward the torque drills. Or maybe you have late vertical force. So then I think your timing drills or your vertical force protocols might be better. But as you work through this protocol, you're going to hit all of those different aspects. And yes, maybe you do a couple drills that you didn't need to do, but at the same time, there's not going to be any downside to doing that. So think of it that way. We build it so that you can get a lot out of it if you haven't done an assessment. If you have the ability to go get your data taken on force plates, we're happy to look at it for you and tell you exactly what you should do. All right, little technical question here about the app. Will the app replace the website training videos and programs? Will there be a cost? Well, the training videos that you see on our website right now, so those will be also in the app. There is going to be a free basic version of the app that will have access to a lot of our different training protocols for a lot of our different products. The premium version of our app will have a cost. It's going to be $9.99 a month. That's going to include access to a lot of advanced analytics, all of the physical screening, and all of those different pieces of program customization. And then it's also going to give you access to about 30 of these new protocols that we're looking at as well. So you're always going to have free access to some protocols to use with all of our different protocols here at SuperSpeed. We think that's a very important part, of our brand and has been forever. But we also feel like we're creating a lot of very specified and almost personalized programs at this point through this app. And for some of that service, we are going to be charging just a small subscription fee for that platform. But trust me, get in there in this beta and check it out. I think what you're going to be getting there for $9.99 a month is, a whole heck of a lot of top level golf instruction. I think everyone's going to really like it. What are the biggest power leaks for the mid-handicap golfer? Boy, that opens a can of worms, huh, Tyler?
Huge Louise, right? Like,
we could talk about this probably for the next 2 hours.
maybe that should be our next webinar, right? And
I know power leaks for the mid-handicap golfer. We could probably get a few and see them. Okay, as a golf coach, I would say that people fit into buckets in a lot of ways. So if we have a mid-handicap golfer, let's take a common one, like your mid-handicap golfer that tends to swing the club too outside to in, has trouble getting the face closed, hits a slice, and that kind of a movement. Generally with that player, some of the biggest things that cause issues for that player tend to be more mechanically based. Okay. They tend to have backswing issues. They tend to have takeaway problems, face to path relationship problems. So that's more mechanically based issues that happen on that player. You could also have physical concerns that lead into that. The other one that we see a lot of is kind of that real shallow sweeping kind of player. That's a player I tends to be more of rotationally limited. We tend to see them not being able to rotate through the shot. Those are players that tend to have, I guess all of them can have really late force pieces. It's very hard to generalize this. I feel like we should.
Yeah,
Mike, like 4 common mid-handicap golfers and look at, oh God, he's going grip strength. I think that's a big one too.
Yeah, for forces, right? I would say again, low and late forces, I think, are obviously a big thing we see across the board with golfers, which is why we feel like something that really attacks that from a ground reaction force standpoint is so key. Obviously, I've been doing a ton with grip strength. I have some students right now who are doing a fun project that we're excited to roll out this semester. And so I can't help but
Again,
bring that
our
up.
goal for the last 4 years, 5 years at SuperSpeed Golf has been to take speed and power training to the next level by creating a much more comprehensive approach to your speed and power programs. And with that, and creating a lot of these new protocols that hit a lot of those different areas, and this app platform launching that's going to be able to identify some of those tendencies for each individual and point them in the right direction. That's kind of why we're doing it.
Yeah. Looks like a question just rolled in, Mike. Just kind of age limit on the new Force board. And I think Mike already talked about the real benefit in some of the things that we could see with older golfers in terms of proprioception and balance and things like that. We would want to just make sure that this golfer for sure has clearance from a doctor to participate in a physical activity protocol. I think that's something that's really important. If we're seeing younger golfers, right, on the other end of that spectrum, I would say I would be using this with younger golfers like crazy. I think being able to train up this next generation, we know the next generation is going to be fast. They're already incredibly fast. But I think of these junior golfers, getting them pushing at the right time in the right locations, activating all those things, man, I would get my young golfers on these Force boards immediately.
I mean, who is the subscription for the app, aimed at? It's everybody. So again, one of the things that we get questions all the time, of golfers who, maybe they're mid-handicap golfers, maybe they don't play a lot, they're not really interested in taking a lot of golf lessons or going to see a golf fitness trainer. We're trying to provide a platform there where you get access to a lot of good kind of personalized instruction, kind of tailored towards speed and power side that, will be a very inexpensive and affordable way to get your feet wet in that world. Yeah, and if you get a lot of great success, we're expecting that a lot of those people may eventually go, see a golf coach or see a trainer. But we can get you started with that stuff just through an app platform, which I think is going to be a really fun thing. Obviously, I think your higher level players, your competitive players are going to love getting in that and tracking all of their different stats and data and seeing how all of that progresses over time, those stats in their programs, and seeing that actual results of the programs they're doing in their speed and power gains are going to be very beneficial for a lot of those players. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to make this available to everyone that plays golf and wants to hit the ball further.
And I would say, Mike, that and I think you mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, like if you want to just use the SuperSpeed products and the app to walk you through the training, track your speeds and your stats, your gains, see where you fit on a leaderboard of people that are your similar age and handicap, that's all going to be contained in the free app, right? We want that to be something that you can continue to do. What we just find is after we get so many emails that after they've had that first 8 to 10 weeks of great training, and now they've hit a little bit of a plateau, which we know is going to come in speed training, we feel like what the rest of the app does and the paid portion of it is going to unlock the ways to crush through that next plateau. Find the next piece that's going to help you gain the next few miles per hour that most of our users, once they have a little bit of a taste of speed, they just want more. And so that might be these high level players. It might be that 12 handicap who's dropped from an 18 and now they want to get to a single digit. I think it's really targeted towards, as Mike suggested, the comprehensive speed training, how to do the next steps of speed training.
Okay, Tyler, I think we'll end it there. We really appreciate everybody hanging out with us this evening. If you have any questions, always feel free to shoot us an email at info@superspeedgolf.com. If you'd like access to the beta app, please send us an email and let us know you're interested, and we'll get you registered. And again, check out that special on the Force Board Pro. That's only going to be available until we have inventory in stock here in a few weeks. So check that out. Tyler, have a great evening, and everybody, just let's get out there and create some more speed.
Awesome. See ya.